Some dates are more than just numbers on a calendar. They're like these portals to the past where myth and nature and human history all just converge in the most incredible ways. And April 23rd is absolutely one of those dates. Today, we're going to explore how this single day connects an ancient dragon-slaying myth all the way to the birth of the modern Turkish Republic, and in doing so reveal this hidden rhythm that has shaped life in Anatolia for millennia.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Officially, April 23rd is a huge deal in Turkey. It celebrates the opening of the Turkish Grand National Assembly back in 1920, a major moment for sure. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. The real question we should be asking is, why that specific day? As we're about to see, this modern political anniversary is actually just the latest chapter in a story that wasn't written by politicians, but by the seasons themselves.
So take a look at this. This is a directive signed by Mustafa Kemal, the founder of modern Turkey, laying out the plans for the opening of the new parliament. This is basically a founding document for Turkish sovereignty. But again, you got to ask, why this date, April 23rd? Well, as we'll see, this was no accident. Not at all. It was a deliberate choice, one that tapped into an ancient rhythm of life and war in Anatolia that goes back centuries before the Republic was even a thought.
To really get this, we're going to have to dig down through the layers of history, kind of like archaeologists. We'll kick things off with a powerful myth about a dragon. Then we'll see how that story is basically hardwired into the climate of Anatolia. From there, we'll watch as the Sultan's armies march to that very same seasonal clock. And finally, we'll see all these threads come together in the spring of 1920, marking a new political dawn.
So our journey begins in the world of myth. We're looking at the famous legend of St. George and the Dragon. And yeah, we know it as a Christian story, but its DNA is so much older. It echoes this timeless struggle between the seasons that you can find all across the ancient world.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that we have to reinterpret what the dragon means. In these ancient myths, from Hittite Anatolia all the way to Persia, the dragon isn't just some evil monster. It is winter. It's a cosmic force that freezes the world, holding life itself captive. And this really shows what that meant in a very real, practical sense. For any society based on farming or herding, the dragon is the force that freezes the rivers, blocking the water. It's the snow and the mud that make the roads totally impassable. It's the frozen ground that means nothing can grow. The dragon essentially represents a total shutdown of the economy. Everything just stops.
So here's the main takeaway. When the spring hero, in this case St. George, slays the dragon, it's not just a simple story of good versus evil. It's a massive cosmological event. It is the symbolic act that breaks winter's chokehold, unlocks the land, and allows the whole cycle of life, trade, and travel to start all over again. The dragon's death is the arrival of spring.
All right, let's move on and see how this powerful myth isn't just a bedtime story. It's deeply connected to the real-world climate and the folk traditions of Anatolia. This is where the myth really gets its hands dirty. You see, in Anatolia, which has always been a crossroads of cultures, the figure of St. George, or Ayayorgi, kind of merges with this mysterious and revered Islamic figure called Hızır, who you might also know as Al-Khidr. Hızır is this immortal green man who brings life and fertility back to the land. For centuries, both Christians and Muslims in the area saw these two figures as doing the exact same job. They were the ones who announced that spring was here. It's a beautiful testament to the shared seasonal consciousness of the land.
And get this folklore is totally backed up by hard science. Just look at the average last frost dates for the central Anatolian plateau. Ankara, April 25th. Konya, April 30th. This is not random. The St. George Festival on April 23rd falls precisely on that threshold, that moment when the very real danger of a killer frost is finally over, making the land safe enough for travel and farming to begin.
This period was so important that it was actually formalized in the folk calendar as Ruz-ı Hızır, which means the days of Hızır. This marked the beginning of the summer half of the year, the season of action, and it all kicked off right around April 23rd. It was, quite literally, nature giving the green light.
Which, of course, brings us to the Sultan. Because if this is the calendar for farmers and shepherds, you can bet it was also the calendar for the biggest, most powerful institution that depended on the land, the Ottoman Army. The entire empire marched to this exact same beat.
The Ottoman military year was split cleanly in two, right along the lines of this folk calendar. As you can see, the campaign season, Ruz-ı Hızır, officially began on April 23rd of the old Rumi calendar, which was a solar calendar the Ottomans used for civic stuff. The season of war ended on Ruz-ı Hızır, November 8th. See? An army's movements weren't just dictated by a ruler's whim, they were dictated by the seasons.
And the logic here was just inescapable for a pre-modern army that ran on horsepower. You simply could not move tens of thousands of soldiers and animals before late April. You had to have fresh grass for the cavalry, and they were your most critical weapon. You had to wait for all that spring mud to dry up and for the swollen rivers to become crossable. The mountain passes had to be clear of snow. April 23rd wasn't just a tradition. It was a hardcore logistical necessity. This quote from the historian M.F. Colliser just nails the point perfectly. That window in late April and early May was non-negotiable. It was the absolute last chance for the army's horses to load up on nutrient-rich spring grass before a grueling, months-long campaign. I mean, the health of the horses pretty much determined the fate of the empire.
Okay, so let's fast forward to 1920. The Ottoman capital, Istanbul, is under foreign occupation. The empire is collapsing. A new national movement is gathering in the heart of Anatolia, in Ankara. And when it came time for them to make their move, to formally declare their existence, they followed that same ancient rhythm we've been tracing this whole time.
This slide really connects all the dots for us. For centuries, the logic has been exactly the same. First, the symbolic dragon of winter is slain. Then, the physical land opens up, which makes movement possible. That's when armies have always marched. It's when collective action has always begun. And in 1920, this same logic leads to a new kind of mobilization, the opening of a parliament and the birth of a nation.
After the occupation of Istanbul completely shattered the old government, Mustafa Kemal issued this directive. It called for new elections and for an assembly to gather in Ankara with extraordinary powers. A new collective action was desperately needed to save the nation. And its most important moment, the Grand Assembly, was going to follow that old, familiar timetable. Now, the choice of date was incredibly deliberate. The opening was actually first planned for April 22nd, but they moved it one day to Friday, April 23rd. This was a brilliant symbolic move. It aligned the birth of the nation not just with the start of the season of action, but also with Friday, the holy day of prayer in Islam. It was just this incredibly powerful way to assert the moral and spiritual legitimacy of this new national movement. So when we look back at April 23rd, we're not just looking at a single event that happened in 1920. We're looking at a cross-section of history, a day where all these different layers of meaning fuse into one powerful moment. Let's just quickly recap everything we've uncovered here. April 23rd is a day of mythological renewal, the symbolic defeat of winter. It's a day of agricultural transition, the moment the land physically unlocks. It's a day of military mobilization, the traditional start of the Ottoman campaign season. And finally, it's a day of political foundation, the birth of sovereignty for a new republic. All of this history is packed into one single day.
In the end, April 23rd is just this powerful reminder that history isn't only a sequence of human events. It's often guided by deeper, quieter rhythms, the ancient cycle of the seasons that has shaped how we farm, how we fight, and even how we form our nations. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many of our own modern traditions are still silently guided by that same ancient pulse?